The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. What rattled people was how silently everything shifted, as if the atmosphere itself changed before anyone could explain why. According to murmurs now spreading rapidly across social media, a claim emerged that wasn't shouted into a microphone or splashed across bold headlines. It was allegedly shared in private, passed quietly from one person to the next. And that secrecy is what made it feel unsettling. Within hours, timelines became distorted. Screenshots surfaced without explanation. Voice notes were referenced but never confirmed. And suddenly, a narrative no one asked for began forming on its own. Fans say the shock didn't come from disorder or open conflict. It came from the implication, the idea that an intensely personal allegation, allegedly connected to Tamar Braxton's marriage, slipped into conversation and refused to fade. One name kept reappearing in every version of the rumor: Mendeecees. Attached to it was a claim so serious that people froze mid-scroll, unsure whether to continue reading or look away. According to online discussion, the origin of the allegation wasn't a blogger or gossip outlet. It was Tamar's husband. At least, that's how the story is being repeated. Not something he declared publicly, but something people say he confided behind closed doors. The claim wasn't presented as idle gossip. It was framed as conviction. And that conviction, fans believe, altered everything. Emotions intensified as the rumor took shape, because this wasn't only about betrayal. It was about timing, trust, and a pregnancy allegation that allegedly reshaped the entire relationship. As the hours passed, concern turned into discomfort. Group chats filled with disbelief. Comment sections echoed the same question: why now? Some posts went even further. Flaming reports were referenced alongside the allegation, always described as explosive, never revealed. That detail alone pushed the discussion into more troubling territory. Fans were stunned by how quickly curiosity shifted into alarm. Nothing has been confirmed, no statements, no documents, no evidence. Yet, the online atmosphere grew heavier by the minute. Silence began to speak louder than words. And as the story continued to spread, one thing became clear: whether true or not, the claim itself had already caused irreversible damage. It made people pay attention. And once attention is captured, rumors don't wait for facts to catch up. The conversations that followed didn't unfold in public view. They happened quietly through private calls and tense exchanges later described only in fragments. According to those fragments, Tamar's husband wasn't yelling or making accusations. He was questioning, revisiting moments that once felt ordinary but now felt unfamiliar. Friends who were allegedly part of those discussions say, his tone was steady but unsettled, like someone trying to understand how a story they trusted had suddenly shifted. Online chatter suggests the belief forming in his mind didn't appear all at once. It developed gradually, layered over time, fueled by small inconsistencies that no longer lined up. A missed explanation, a change in routine. Details that once seemed harmless began to feel suspicious. Fans are shocked by how quickly hindsight turns into certainty once doubt takes hold. Moments that once felt insignificant suddenly carried weight. According to repeated retellings, the name Mendeecees surfaced not as a careless accusation, but as a possibility that refused to leave the conversation. Those repeating the rumor insist the husband never framed it as proven fact. It was described as something he believed could explain everything that no longer made sense. Emotions reportedly intensified as that belief settled in, because once it did, every unanswered question seemed to point in the same direction. People close to the situation are said to have noticed the shift before the internet did. Plans were delayed, communication slowed. A silence settled in, one that felt tense rather than peaceful. Some claim Tamar's inner circle sensed the strain immediately, even if no one could put it into words. Fans observing from a distance say the energy around her changed, not in an obvious or dramatic way, but heavier, as if something unspoken lingered between everyone involved. As whispers spread outward, reactions multiplied. Friends allegedly urged restraint, reminding the husband that suspicion is not evidence. Others reportedly encouraged him to trust his instincts, warning that ignoring doubt can lead to deeper regret. The family was left divided not because anything was confirmed, but because belief alone can be powerful. Emotions ran high as quiet sides were taken, long before the public fully understood what was being discussed online. The narrative had already begun to take shape and sharpen its edges. Posts portrayed the allegation as a long-hidden secret finally coming to light. Comments dissected timing and possible intent. Fans were stunned by how quickly curiosity hardened into certainty for some. People began drawing connections that may not belong together, revisiting old interviews and re-examining past moments through a different lens. Silence started to feel louder than denial, even though no denial had been made. According to circulating narratives, a pregnancy element is what escalated everything. Not because it was confirmed, but because of what it suggested. Suddenly, the situation was no longer just about betrayal, it was about consequences that could alter lives. Fans described stopping mid-scroll when that detail surfaced, unsure whether to continue reading or turn away. The discussion shifted instantly from gossip to worry, from speculation to fear. Group chats flooded with disbelief. Some questioned the legitimacy of the allegation, while others focused on the emotional impact it implied. Fans were shocked by how empathy and judgment existed side by side. Some defended Tamar passionately, arguing that unverified claims should never be accepted as fact. Others countered that such beliefs don't form without cause. The debate itself became part of the narrative. According to online discussion, Tamar did not address the situation publicly as it spread. Her silence became a blank canvas for interpretation. Supporters saw it as grace and self-control. Critics framed it as avoidance. Neither perspective could be proven, yet both were expressed with confidence. Emotions intensified as the lack of clarity allowed speculation to fill the gaps. People repeating the rumor insist the husband's response was private, not performative. There were no leaked confrontations, no recorded scenes. Instead, there was distance withdrawal, and the sense that something foundational had shifted and might not be easily repaired. Fans say this made the allegation feel more believable to some, not because of proof, but because quiet reactions often feel more authentic than dramatic ones. As the story continued to spread, another layer emerged that darkened the situation further. Online discussions began referencing alleged reports in hushed terms, always described as unverified, yet repeated enough to create unease. Fans were shocked by how repetition alone can give weight to an idea, whether true or not. The suggestion alone changed the tone of every conversation that followed. Supporters expressed concern over how quickly health-related speculation entered the narrative. Some urged restraint, warning that such rumors can cause real harm. Others dismissed those concerns, arguing that public figures exist under constant scrutiny. The family appeared divided, not just privately, but in the eyes of the audience, split between defenders and skeptics. As hours turned into days, the rumor refused to fade. Each retelling added new details, sometimes conflicting, sometimes reinforcing what had already been said. Some claimed the husband had confided in a small circle, describing a realization that reshaped his understanding of the relationship. Others argued this was exaggerated private doubt inflated by the internet into public scandal. Still, the story gained momentum. Fans were shocked by how quickly belief spread without verification. Once the idea took hold, reactions followed as if something final had already occurred. People spoke with certainty, even while acknowledging that nothing was confirmed. The emotional truth of the narrative seemed to outweigh factual clarity. What lingered most was the sense of loss attached to the rumor. Trust appeared fractured. Peace felt disrupted. Even those who questioned the allegation admitted that the damage described by those repeating it felt real. Belief alone has the power to alter relationships. By the time the discussion peaked for the day, the narrative had shifted from a question into an assumption for many, not because new information emerged, but because silence continued. Fans debated whether a response would ease the situation or make it worse. Emotions ran high as people argued over accountability, privacy, and the cost of public attention. Throughout it all, one fact remained unchanged. Nothing had been confirmed. No statements were issued. No documents surfaced. Yet the story continued to move forward, driven by reaction rather than evidence. And as it did, it became clear that even unverified claims can carry weight once they enter the collective imagination. The attention didn't fade after the initial surge. Instead, it entered a quieter, more intense phase. People were no longer asking what was said, they were asking how long it had been believed. According to online chatter, the claim was not something that appeared overnight. It was portrayed as a realization that developed after weeks of strain, uneasy moments, and conversations that never truly found resolution. Those retelling the account say the husband began re-examining past memories through a different lens. Situations that once felt routine started to feel suspicious. A shift in tone during phone calls. Unexpected defensiveness over simple questions. Fans are stunned by how easily memories can be reshaped once trust begins to fracture. Hindsight has a way of turning coincidence into intention. Even without concrete proof, people close to the situation reportedly noticed the change in him first. He grew more withdrawn, more cautious. Conversations felt heavier, as though he was carrying doubts he couldn't bring himself to express. Some claim he tried to reason with himself, reminding himself that suspicion does not equal truth. Others say the doubt kept resurfacing, returning with greater intensity each time until it felt impossible to ignore. As this internal conflict allegedly continued, murmurs began spreading beyond the inner circle. Not specifics, just impressions. Messages surfaced using phrases like "something isn't right" or "he doesn't seem like himself." Fans observing from afar say, this is how the rumor gained momentum, not through evidence, but through atmosphere, through the sense that something had quietly shifted behind the scenes. Online discussions suggest the pregnancy allegation emerged during this period of uncertainty, not as a confirmed claim, but as a theory that helped connect unresolved thoughts in his mind. Those repeating the rumor insist it was presented as a belief rather than a direct accusation. Yet belief alone can carry enormous weight. Emotions escalated as the idea spread, because it transformed confusion into a narrative that felt complete. Even without proof, friends allegedly responded in different ways. Some urged caution, reminding him that suspicion can distort perception and that stress can create patterns where none exist. Others reportedly validated his feelings, suggesting that intuition shouldn't be dismissed outright. The family became divided not over facts, but over interpretation. Emotions ran high as private disagreements echoed the larger debate playing out online. Meanwhile, fans began dissecting every public appearance they could find. Old clips resurfaced. Interviews were replayed with fresh scrutiny. Fans are shocked by how quickly context disappears once a new storyline takes hold. Smiles were reframed as forced. Pauses were labeled as hesitation. Nothing was allowed to remain neutral anymore, according to circulating posts. Tamar's silence became central to these interpretations. Some viewed it as a deliberate choice to rise above harmful speculation. Others took it as a sign that something serious was unfolding behind closed doors. Neither interpretation was grounded in confirmation, yet both gained traction. Emotions intensified as silence was treated as a message rather than the absence of one. The narrative grew more complex as health-related implications re-entered the conversation. Always described as alleged, always said to have been mentioned privately, never presented publicly. Fans are shocked by how quickly fear spreads when health is introduced, even without specifics. The suggestion alone shifted the tone from gossip to alarm. Supporters expressed unease with this direction. Many argued that repeating such speculation crossed a boundary, regardless of celebrity status. Others pushed back, claiming that concern justified discussion. The divide deepened. The family appeared split in perception, with no clear agreement on responsibility in a situation built entirely on uncertainty as the rumor continued to circulate. Reactions became more emotional than rational. People stopped weighing probability and began responding to how the story felt: betrayal, fear, vulnerability. Those emotions resonated deeply, especially with fans who felt personally connected to Tamar's journey. Fans are shocked by how easily empathy can be redirected by speculation. According to some online accounts, the husband's belief reportedly solidified as the noise increased, not because new information emerged, but because repetition can feel like confirmation. When enough voices repeat a possibility, it can begin to feel real. Friends were said to have encouraged him to protect himself emotionally, reinforcing the idea that something irreversible had already happened. Others allegedly urged restraint, warning that rumors thrive on attention and that silence might be the only way to let them fade. But silence was already being interpreted as something else. Each hour without clarification fueled further speculation. Fans watching from the outside described the atmosphere as suffocating, where saying nothing felt just as risky as saying too much. As debates intensified, focus subtly shifted away from the claim itself and toward its impact. Reactions became the story. Outrage, fear, disbelief, loyalty, all competing for attention. The original question of truth faded into the background, replaced by emotional responses that felt immediate and real. People began discussing consequences before facts, what it would mean for relationships, for trust. For emotional well-being. Fans are shocked by how quickly a rumor can move from possibility to assumed outcome. Even those who acknowledged uncertainty spoke as if damage had already been done. According to ongoing online chatter, the emotional impact described by those sharing the story quickly became a growing concern. References to pressure and emotional strain appeared repeatedly, always framed as worry rather than confirmation. Repetition gave those phrases substance. Time gave them credibility in the eyes of some viewers. Throughout all of this, no new facts emerged, no statements, no proof, no documentation. Yet the discussion never slowed. Instead, it shifted. It intensified. It sustained itself. Fans are stunned by how little factual substance is needed for a narrative to expand once it captures public attention. The rumor had evolved. It was no longer centered solely on what was alleged, but on how people responded to the allegation. Belief moved to the forefront. Emotion replaced certainty. And even without verification, the story felt firmly rooted in the collective imagination, resistant to pause or reconsideration. As time passed, the tone of the conversation shifted again, not louder, but heavier. What began as shock gradually settled into expectation. People stopped asking whether the claim might be true and started asking what it meant once it was believed. According to online chatter, this is where the situation became more complex, because belief began influencing behavior on every side. Those repeating the story say the husband's demeanor continued to change, not in obvious or dramatic ways, but through noticeable distance. Messages reportedly grew shorter. Plans became less definite. Friends said he seemed distracted, as if replaying conversations repeatedly in his mind, searching for clarity that never came. Fans are shocked by how quickly uncertainty can overwhelm. Someone once trust begins to feel unstable. People close to the situation allegedly tried to step in carefully. Some encouraged grounding conversations, reminding him that stress can distort perception. Others advised creating space, believing emotional distance might bring perspective. The family was left divided over which approach was safer. Emotions ran high as each option carried its own risks, either confrontation or deeper withdrawals out online. The audience mirrored that same divide. Some commenters insisted the only responsible response was to wait for confirmation. Others argued that silence already communicated enough. Fans are shocked by how often silence is treated as proof rather than absence. Each day without a statement seemed to solidify assumptions. Even among those claiming neutrality, the pregnancy claim remained at the center of the narrative, not because of new information, but because of what it represented. It reframed the story from personal conflict to irreversible consequence. Timelines were debated endlessly, with people attempting to align imagined dates with public appearances. Fans are shocked by how quickly speculation turns into amateur investigation when curiosity goes unchecked. As this unfolded, discussions surrounding health grew increasingly tense, not in detail, but in tone. Words were chosen cautiously, yet repeated often enough to create fear. Supporters expressed concern that even the language being used was becoming harmful. Others dismissed those concerns, arguing that discussing potential outcomes was not the same as making accusations. According to ongoing chatter, the family was left divided in perception, with empathy and judgment colliding repeatedly. Tamar's silence began to feel less like a personal choice and more like a battleground for interpretation. Every public appearance, no matter how unrelated, was dissected. Fans are shocked by how easily unrelated moments can be absorbed into a narrative once it gains momentum. Smiles were questioned. Calm was reframed as performance. Even normal behavior was treated as suspicious. Some voices pushed back strongly against this pattern. They reminded others that speculation can unfairly reshape reality, especially when deeply personal matters are involved. These voices called for patience, restraint, and empathy. But restraint does not travel as quickly as fear. Emotions ran high as dramatic interpretations continued to dominate the conversation. According to those repeating the story, the husband's belief reportedly became more rigid because of evidence, but because of reinforcement. When doubt is echoed often enough, it can start to feel confirmed. Friends who encouraged emotional self-protection may have unintentionally strengthened that belief. Fans are shocked by how easily support can turn into validation without proof. Others, within the inner circle, allegedly expressed concern about the toll this was taking on everyone involved. The tension was described as constant but quiet, not explosive arguments, but persistent strain, the kind that slowly drains energy. People described an atmosphere where every conversation felt cautious, every word carefully chosen. The lack of resolution weighed heavily. Online reactions intensified as exhaustion set in. People began voicing frustration not only with the situation itself, but with the absence of clarity. Some demanded explanations, while others admitted feeling uncomfortable taking part at all. Fans are shocked by how quickly concern can morph into entitlement. As the story remained unresolved, the narrative widened to include motive. Speculation shifted toward why such an allegation would emerge now. Some suggested long-standing issues had finally reached a breaking point. Others believed outside voices were amplifying private doubts for attention. None of these ideas were verified, yet they spread rapidly. Repetition gave them form. As theories multiplied, the original claim became less important than its consequences. Trust was being assessed publicly. Relationships were judged from a distance. Fans are shocked by how easily people grow comfortable making firm conclusions about situations they cannot confirm. The emotional pull of the story seemed to override restraint. Health-related discussion continued to linger over everything, creating urgency without substance. Supporters warned that this type of speculation can cause lasting damage regardless of truth. Critics responded that avoiding the topic felt like denial. The family appeared divided by values rather than facts, with empathy and skepticism pulling in opposite directions, according to circulating accounts. The pressure behind the scenes was becoming harder to ignore, not because of new developments, but because constant attention magnifies stress. People close to Tamar were described as protective, hesitant to engage with the narrative at all. Fans are shocked by how often silence is interpreted as guilt rather than self-preservation. As days passed, the story began to feel inevitable to some. Phrases suggesting "this explains everything" appeared more frequently. Speculation hardened into assumption, assumption into belief, belief into shared memory. Any correction, if it came, would now have to push against that momentum. Others recognized this shift and raised concern. They warned that once belief settles in, facts struggle to reclaim space. These voices urged people to slow down and question the certainty forming around an unverified claim. But slowing down felt unnatural in an environment driven by immediacy. Emotions ran high as patience competed with anxiety. Gradually, the focus moved away from truth and toward emotional impact. People discussed what damage might already exist regardless of outcome. Trust once shaken is difficult to rebuild. Fans are shocked by how often emotional fallout is mistaken for proof rather than consequence. As the discussion looped, exhaustion set in. The same arguments repeated. The same fears resurfaced. Nothing new emerged, yet urgency remained. People waited for something to happen, unsure what that something should be. Anticipation replaced curiosity. At this stage, the rumor became self-sustaining. It no longer depended on new information. It fed on reaction. Every response, supportive or critical, strengthened its presence. Fans are shocked by how difficult disengagement becomes once a story reaches this phase. What lingered most was discomfort, not because of what was known, but because of what was assumed. The realization that belief alone can fracture relationships weighed heavily on observers. Whether the claim was true or not, the emotional landscape had already shifted. And tension continued to build. The story remained unresolved, suspended between doubt and conviction. No confirmation arrived. No denial followed. Only silence and interpretation looping endlessly. In that space, the narrative continued, shaping itself, driven not by facts, but by fear, repetition, and the human need to make sense of uncertainty. Eventually, the conversation reached a point where nothing new needed to be said for it to continue. Momentum alone carried it forward. People spoke as if waiting for an ending that might never come. According to online chatter, this waiting created its own pressure, weighing on everyone involved, whether directly connected or simply watching from afar. Those repeating the story claimed the atmosphere around Tamar felt increasingly guarded. Not dramatic or chaotic, just cautious. Public appearances were limited. Interactions appeared deliberate. Fans are shocked by how quickly caution is interpreted as concealment. Once suspicion enters the picture, ordinary boundaries begin to look strategic to some observers. People close to the situation were said to be navigating conversations with extreme care, not because they had something to hide, but because every word risked being reshaped online. According to circulating accounts, even neutral remarks were dissected for hidden meaning. Fans are shocked by how little space neutrality has once a narrative takes hold. Online discussions began turning inward. Rather than focusing only on the allegation, many started questioning the role of the audience itself. Posts appeared asking how a story built on unverified belief could grow so large. Some expressed discomfort with their own participation, admitting they shared concern without certainty. Others rejected that reflection. Arguing public figures invite scrutiny. Emotions ran high as responsibility became the next point of conflict. And throughout it all, the pregnancy claim continued to hover not because it changed, but because it symbolized finality. People began talking about it as though it explained every moment of past tension, even without confirmation. Fans are shocked by how easily a single idea can become the filter through which everything else is interpreted. Once that filter is in place, alternative explanations fade into the background. Health-related murmurs lingered beneath the surface, resurfacing whenever the discussion slowed not as new developments, but as reminders of what many feared most. Supporters called for empathy, warning that repeating such speculation could cause real harm. Critics brushed those concerns aside, arguing that worry justified conversation. The family appeared divided by values rather than evidence. As days passed, fatigue became impossible to ignore. The same arguments cycled endlessly. The same anxieties returned. Nothing new surfaced. Yet the sense of urgency never disappeared. Fans are shocked by how anticipation replaces curiosity, how people keep watching not to learn something new, but simply to see what happens next. Some voices urged a pause, arguing that constant engagement was only deepening the damage. Stepping away, they said, was the only path toward clarity. Others pushed back, insisting that disengagement would allow the truth to vanish. Emotions ran high as people debated whether restraint was responsible or evasive. Silence from those involved continued. And with it, interpretation multiplied. Every hour without comment added weight to assumptions already forming. Fans are shocked by how silence becomes a narrative of its own, often revealing more about the audience than the subject. In the absence of words, imagination filled every gap, and attention shifted from shock to expectation. People began speaking in terms of outcomes rather than possibilities. What this would mean for trust, for relationships, for healing. Fans are shocked by how quickly imagined consequences start to feel inevitable once belief takes hold. Even those who admitted uncertainty spoke as though damage had already occurred. According to ongoing online chatter, the emotional strain described behind the scenes became a focal point not because it could be verified, but because it was expected. Stress was assumed. Fragility was anticipated. Phrases suggesting vulnerability circulated freely, repeated often enough to feel familiar. And familiarity quietly turned into belief. Others pushed back against this pattern, arguing that projecting distress onto someone without confirmation was itself harmful. Vulnerability, they said, should not be assumed or exploited. These voices called for compassion without speculation. But moderation struggled to compete with urgency. Fear travels faster than care. The narrative shifted again, this time toward inevitability. Phrases implying this explains everything appeared more often. Speculation hardened into assumption. Assumption settled into collective memory. Fans are shocked by how quickly memory can be written without evidence. Once a story reaches this stage, correction becomes difficult. This stage, correction becomes difficult. Even as attention slowly drifted, the story didn't vanish. It lingered. It settled into the background of how people spoke about those involved. Trust had been questioned. Boundaries crossed. Peace disturbed. Whether justified or not, those effects were real. Belief alone had reshaped perception. Some supporters expressed sadness over that realization. They acknowledged that even if the claims were false, the association would remain. Search results would continue linking names to heavy implications. Screenshots would keep circulating without context. The internet rarely forgets Yvonne when it moves on. Fans are shocked by how quietly damage can occur. Not through one explosive statement, but through repetition, through sharing, through interpretation layered upon interpretation. None of it requires malicious intent. Curiosity is enough. Concern is enough. Attention is enough. As conversations slowed, they didn't resolve. They simply lost intensity. People refreshed their feeds less often, not because answers arrived, but because exhaustion set in. Yet the narrative remained ready to resurface whenever a new angle appeared. Unfinished stories rarely stayed dormant. What lingered most was the lack of closure. No confirmation. No denial. Just time passing. And instead of clarifying, time allowed assumptions to settle. People began referring to the situation in the past tense as though it were settled history. Memory formed without proof. Some began asking harder questions about privacy, entitlement, and the cost of turning uncertainty into spectacle. Fans are shocked by how rarely those questions trend, yet how necessary they feel once the noise fades. Reflection arrived late, but it arrived. There was no dramatic ending, no reveal, no resolution. Just a gradual quiet as attention shifted elsewhere. But the absence of an ending didn't undo what had already happened. Beliefs had formed. Narratives were written. Emotions were spent. And perhaps that's why this story lingers. Not because of the claim itself, but because of what it reveals, how quickly people decide, how eagerly they participate, and how difficult it becomes to step back once momentum takes over. Nothing definitive was proven. Nothing officially stated. Yet the impact remains shaped by fear, speculation, and the human need to make sense of silence. If you've made it this far, it means this story didn't just grab your attention, it made you pause. And that pause matters. Because stories like this don't spread only because of shock. They spread because of uncertainty. Because silence invites interpretation. Because people try to understand what they're seeing without all the facts. You've watched how an unverified claim never confirmed or denied slowly turned into a full narrative. Fans were shocked. Emotions ran high. The family was divided by opinion, not evidence. Belief took over, so now the question isn't only about what was claimed. It's about how we respond when rumors move faster than truth. Does silence help in situations like this, or does it make things worse? Should public figures feel pressured to respond to unverified allegations, or does responding give rumors more power? Where should the line be drawn between concern and intrusion? If you believe stories like this should be examined, not blindly consumed, hit the like button so this conversation doesn't get buried under noise. Subscribe if you want coverage focused on context, reaction, and accountability rather than shock value. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Do you think the internet crossed a line here? Or were the reactions justified? Should audiences slow down when claims involve deeply personal issues like trust and health? Or is scrutiny simply part of fame? Your voice matters more than you think. Because the next chapter of stories like this isn't written only by insiders or headlines. It's shaped by how people like you choose to question, reflect, and engage.